You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 31 of the I Still Love This Game podcast. In today's show we're going to be addressing one of my more passionate topics, and that's discussing Dr. J's career and his legacy. It's something that I've been getting a lot of questions of lately, especially I've been looking at the history of the game, it's more specifically Slam's top 100 list, and I pointed out Kevin Durant was ranked ahead of him, and it's something that I've been seeing a little bit more frequently, people placing Kevin Durant as the third best small forward of all time, behind Bird and LeBron, in whichever order you want to put those two. But regardless, they put him ahead of Julius Erving, and that's something that I will, I'll argue with a lot of energy. So it's a topic that's come up, it's a question that's come up a lot, so I'm happy to address it. And speaking of addressing things, there is something that I do, a little bit of housekeeping. I've been receiving a lot of questions about Lonzo Ball and NBA players and politics. Let's start with Lonzo Ball. Right now, he's maybe the 20th best point guard in the NBA. You can make an argument since the All-Star game, he's been about the 15th best point guard in the NBA. Look, if I'm finding it hard to find time to talk about Damian Lillard, who should be a top 5 MVP candidate this year, there's no way I'm going to be talking about Lonzo Ball. Unless if he does something incredible on the basketball court. I couldn't care less about what ridiculous attention-whoring activities his father is up to. I couldn't care less how well his brothers are doing in a youth league competition in Lithuania. I couldn't care less about the big baller brand or whatever the hell that is. I am not interested. If he starts playing really well on the court, I will start to talk about it. Until then, if you send me messages regarding Lonzo Ball getting 8 points in a game or 15 points in a game and 5 rebounds, quite honestly, the Lakers are irrelevant, and until they become relevant, so is Lonzo Ball. He is also irrelevant. Now, when it comes to the NBA players talking about politics, this is something that I've wanted to avoid for so long, but I've gotten too many questions. It's kind of disrespectful for me to continually ignore them, so I want to address this now. I created this podcast to be purely a basketball platform, and I intend for it to stay that way. If you want to see all that other stuff mixed in with sports analysis, go watch those other networks, because they do that. They'll ram that down your throats even if you don't want it. Now, what I will say before I let this topic go is, as I said, players are totally entitled to their viewpoints. But when you will say something ignorant, like such and such is a racist, or such and such is dividing the country, you better back that up, especially if you're doing it publicly. Hell, if you say that to anybody about anybody at a bar, they'll probably be like, well, what do you mean? If they're open-minded, they'll want to hear it, not just, none of this listen and believe nonsense. Back it up, prove your point. Now, if you don't prove your point, and you're expecting everyone just to side with you, and you get offended because people will call you out on it, that's an inconsistency in standards, because you're criticizing one person for being divisive, but if someone has a different opinion to you, then you're going to go cry about it. Now, what that journalist said about shutting up and dribble, yeah, that's a pretty arrogant statement. And it doesn't help the conversation whatsoever. But just, if you're so offended by what she said, present a better argument. Don't run around and be offended and throw, sly little digs at the Oscars and stuff like that. That doesn't help the conversation. If you're so interested in the conversation and improving the standard of conversation in politics, don't lower yourself to that standard. Don't find the extreme on one side and argue with the extreme. Find the intelligence on the other side and see if there's some kind of middle ground or compromise so you can advance things. That's how usually conversations work. Conversations are not meant for people to just ramble on with their own opinions. Conversations are meant so we can listen to one another and hopefully we can learn from one another. And where that's most valuable and where it should be most valuable is politics. And politics has gone straight down the other way, where everyone's talking, no one's listening. And if people want to talk about why countries are so divided and societies are so divided, it's not because of one individual. It's because of both sides, conservatives and progressives, continue to talk over each other or ignoring the other person and not listening whatsoever. As long as they get their points out, it doesn't work that way. And we're seeing the results. And that is honestly as much about politics as I'll ever want to discuss on this show. Dr. J, however, that is something I definitely want to discuss. So let's get right into it. The thing about Julius Erving, and whenever his name is brought up by NBA fans, especially fans that haven't watched him play, and you can't use age as an excuse for this, because you can just go onto YouTube and you can find plenty of games, full games, that he's played in. But the thing, whenever his name comes up, is people just want to talk about the highlights. It's almost like a Vince Carter type of situation where people will talk about, these incredible dunks or, the athleticism and all that. But the reality of it is there was so much more substance to Dr. J's game. He wasn't just a showman. I mean, he was the ultimate showman, really. But he was more than that. He was an NBA great, an absolute icon of the game, revolutionized the game. And we'll get into that shortly. But I want to begin by talking about this man's awards, his numbers. Basically, let's go through his resume. And yes, I am going to include the ABA, because there's no reason I should not include the ABA. Because yes, if you want to talk about a difference in standards of competition between the ABA and NBA, I agree with you. There is a discrepancy when you're talking about the NBA to ABA. But ask yourself this, and be honest with it. Is the standard of competition, was a bigger difference in the standard of competition between the NBA to the ABA than what we've seen with the East and West conferences in the last 20 years? Yeah, 20 years. It was 98 since Jordan retired, which is really the last time we had proper balance between the two conferences. And I've asked myself that a few times, and the answer is no. If anything, it was probably a much smaller difference between the NBA to ABA than the two conferences in the last 20 years. Now, do we penalize LeBron? Do we penalize Paul Pierce? Do we penalize Allen Iverson, Tracy McGrady, players like that? We really don't, when you think about it. If anything, it kind of gets swept under the rug. I mean, I'm quite critical of the whole 7 straight finals appearances because the East has been so bad. But when you look at a lot of mainstream media and how some idiot, I can't remember who it was saying it was the greatest accomplishment in basketball history, going to 7 straight finals. Yeah, well, duh, he's against teams that wouldn't even make it out of the first round, if to the playoffs at all, if they're in the West. Now, you might be asking, well, hold on a second, how many ABA teams would be successful in the NBA back then? And it's a great question. It's a question that cannot be answered. But what I will say is the NBA and ABA played in a lot of exhibition games. A lot of fans don't know about it. I didn't know about this until about 18 months ago. And the ABA was very competitive in a lot of those games. To the point where the first year that they did this, it was an 11-8 advantage to the NBA over the ABA teams. Granted, they're just exhibition games. It's hard to tell what the intensity, especially not being able to watch them. But 11-8 is not a bad result. It's not like they were getting beaten 15-1. And yeah, there was probably a lot of pride going on. These guys were semi-professional, especially from the ABA standpoint. They probably had a chip on their shoulder. The NBA guys probably wanted to show them that they're in a completely different stratosphere, kind of like the NFL to XFL kind of a situation. And I'm sure that they would have been competitive, especially at that era. That's just one point that I wanted to bring up. The other point that I wanted to address is you look at some of the great players that played in the ABA, whether it's Dr. J, obviously, or Moses Malone, or Artis Gilmore, or David Thompson, George Gervin. I mean, you could go through. There's a lot of really great ABA players that made the jump to the NBA when the merge happened. And when you look at the production of those players when they went to the NBA, in some cases, their production actually went up. Moses Malone's a good example for that. And there was something that I read from was actually from Marv Albert, who claims to be a big fan of Dr. J, and he was saying that Dr. J, when he made it to the NBA, he was just an all-star level player, whereas he was dominating the ABA. That was so wrong of him to say. Let's just look at some numbers and some awards that he got when he became a member of the 76ers. In Dr. J's first 8 seasons in the NBA, he averaged 23.2 points per game on 51% shooting. He also averaged 7.3 rebounds per game, 4.1 assists per game, 1.9 steals per game, and 1.6 blocks per game. Now, granted, that isn't the production isn't as jaw-dropping as what he was doing early on in his ABA career, but still, that's far better than what the picture that Marv Albert was trying to paint by saying that he went from being ultra dominant, Wilt Chamberlain-esque, of the ABA, and then he went to being a ho-hum, just another all-star, but his name value sort of superseded him, like I said before, like a Vince Carter. And that's just not true. It really isn't. Because when you look at the numbers, let's go a little bit deeper with these numbers, and let's look at his first 4 years in the playoffs. And this is in 2 years, 2 of these 4 years, he took the 76ers to the NBA Finals. And this is combined from 77 to 1980, 25.1 points per game, 51% shooting, 7.5 rebounds again, 4.6 assists, 2 steals, 1.7 blocks. Those are incredible numbers. And of course, you've got to adjust, just because the numbers are a little bit less than what he was doing in the ABA, you need to adjust for pace of play as well, because the ABA was played at a much faster pace than what the NBA was. So whilst the numbers have dropped down, you look at the percentage, the shooting percentage are actually better in the NBA than what they were in the ABA for him. Rebounding numbers are significantly down, but once again, they were asking him to play center a lot of the times. He was, when we talk about the evolution of the center position and the bigs of today's NBA game, look at what they were doing in the ABA. They were playing, Dr. J, who was 6'8", 6'9" at center, and he was getting them 15, 16 rebounds a game. He was great at rebounding. One of the absolute greatest for his size. Everyone wants to rave about LeBron's rebounding numbers. Have a look at have a look at Dr. J's. And honestly, the ultimate rebuttal to what Marv Albert had to say was in 1981, Julius Erving was the NBA MVP. This is when he averaged 24.6 points per game, 8 rebounds per game, 4.5 assists a game, 2.1 steals per game, 1.8 blocks per game, and he was shooting around 52% from the field. So once again, if he was just at an all-star, these numbers, this kind of production is not just at an all-star level. This is at the very top of the NBA level. So he didn't come in and his game did not drop one bit. And if anything, he elevated the level of competition big time in the NBA. And he really revolutionized basketball. We'll get to that in a second, as I said before. But the point I am trying to make here is the ABA was not the XFL. It's not the D League. It's not the Chinese League or anything like that. We are talking about some incredible competition that shaped basketball's future. And that is not hyperbole. And you cannot dismiss the accomplishments and the careers, the ABA careers of these ABA great players. Because that's half of their careers is just gets completely wiped off. Now, if you just look at the NBA resume of Julius Erving and you compare that to the NBA resume of Kevin Durant, then sure, I get why you would put Kevin Durant ahead of Dr. J. But that is completely unfair because you're wiping away so many accomplishments like it's nothing. And I'm not going to just sweep it under the rug and pretend the ABA did not happen. It absolutely happened, and it changed basketball forever. In a good way. Magic Johnson said that, Kareem said that Dr. J revolutionized basketball, and it went from being a horizontal game to a vertical game. Magic Johnson said that he made basketball beautiful, referring to Dr. J, obviously. That's some high praise from 2 of the 10 greatest players of all time, at least. I mean, you can make an argument both are in the top 5 of all time. But why this is so important to this conversation for Julius Erving is when you combine Dr. J's ABA and NBA careers, you get a 3-time world champion, a 4-time regular season MVP, you get a 16-time All-Star, you got a guy that accumulated over 30,000 points for his career, well over 10,000 rebounds for his career, over 5,000 assists for his career, over 2,000 steals, and nearly 2,000 blocks. Oh, and by the way, he also revolutionized basketball. You know, there's a lot of people that dispute whether he should be the third greatest small forward of all time. And maybe I'm going to come around on that. Maybe he should be number 1. Maybe he should be number 2. With a resume like that, it's a much easier argument to present than him being number 4 or number 5. Number 4 or number 5 is just insulting. Now, in 5, 6, 7 years, maybe it will be a discussion as to where Kevin Durant's place in history lies. But right now, you compare the resumes of Kevin Durant to Julius Erving's, there is no comparison. And there is no way he is getting potential. He's getting in on potential. Like, oh, well, if he continues this trajectory, no. Because he could slide down. Who's to say he's going to continue upwards? Well, how many players have we seen? Derrick Rose is an example. Who would have thought that he would have nosedived so badly? You know, had Derrick Rose continued from 2000, if he had never got injured in 2012, we're now 6 years later, who knows where he would be right now? But we know where he is right now. But at that point, we had no idea. Same with Penny Hardaway. Same with Grant Hill. Same with Allen Iverson. And it pains me to say that because I'm a big Iverson fan. But after 2001, he only won 1 playoff series. And then they got bounced in the second round anyway. And that was in 2003, I think. The point I'm making is I'm not going to give any players, a pass for potential. What they might be able to do in the future. No, when we're talking about legacies and where people rank all time, it has to be set in stone. Because quite honestly, I can't see any reason to award them points based on potential. Why would I do that? I get why people are trying to forecast where maybe Kevin Durant might end up. And yeah, there's a potential that he might end up ahead of Julius Erving. And if he does, then great. He would have earned it. But he has to earn it. He can't just be given it. Players of today cannot just be given an express lane to spots that the pioneers of the game, like Julius Erving had to play their entire careers for. And I don't want to throw a cheap shot at anybody here, but I'm going to. I don't want to, but I have to. I have to point this out. Kevin Durant's crowning achievement came under so much controversy, and now we're meant to forget it? Are we really meant to forget the fact that he left to join a 73-win team to win a title? What value is that? Did we see Dr. J leave after the 82 season where he was 1 year after he was the MVP to go play with the Lakers? Of course not. That would have been the exact same thing. And sometimes context matters. And when I say sometimes, nearly every single time. Context absolutely matters. And Kevin Durant may get a free pass with ESPN and Slam Magazine and Fox Sports and CBS or whatever. He's not getting it here. He is nowhere near Dr. J in terms of legacy or his actual resume. It's just not even close. It's disrespectful. And seeing that I summed that up a lot quicker than I thought I would, we got a little bit of time. So there's a topic that's been on my mind for a while now, and I actually mentioned it earlier in this episode. And that's how bad the Eastern Conference is as opposed to the West. Now, it has been a little bit better this year. When I say a little bit better, it's still day and night between the two conferences. Ironically, last year may have been the closest we've had it in about 6 or 7 years. And that's primarily due to, as I said, Kevin Durant leaving to go to Golden State. And that created, obviously a super team in Golden State, and the rest of the conference was catching up. Now, the rest of the West has kind of caught up. Houston is obviously a lot better. Oklahoma's obviously a lot better, as is Minnesota. And you got other teams emerging, such as Minnesota and Portland and Utah and New Orleans. Whereas the East, the Cavs have gotten so much worse, and I don't know if the Cavs have gotten worse and the rest of the conference has just sort of plateaued and they're just looking better than what the Cavs were because the Cavs were the standard for so long. But it's gotten so bad that we have to face facts, and the East has lost all relevancy. Just look at Toronto, how well Toronto is playing. Nobody is talking about them because no one gives them a shot. No one really believes that they've got an opportunity to win the NBA title. Whereas everyone's talking about Houston, everyone's talking about Golden State. People still want to talk about Oklahoma a lot. They're talking about Minnesota a lot. Nobody is, and justifiably so, really talking about teams coming out of, I mean, you'll always get the drama associated with LeBron, but the conversations now with LeBron is, can he get the Cavs back to the finals, not can he win the title? And it's been so bad that, look, I've been critical of the East for a long time, but now a lot of other people have started catching off, and they just don't care. And this is the biggest nightmare, and this is why I've been so passionate about getting rid of the conferences, because in an ideal world, I don't want the conferences to go. I like having the structure, there is some history there, I get that. But it's been bad for 20 years, and what's more important is seeing the best basketball in the finals or as the playoffs progresses. Not, okay, we get outstanding basketball from the first round to the conference finals on one side, and we get some shocking basketball on the other side. You know what? Just get rid of the conferences. Just get rid of the conferences. I've been over this so many times. Keep the divisions because you got your rivalries, and because you got rivalries, increase the games to 6 games a year within the divisions. There's 30 games right there because you got 5 division opponents. And then you just play every other team twice and you get around 75 games per season. Now, I've written this out. I've done this before. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Now, if you want to, you could cap the season at 75 games or whatever it is, or you can include, you can come up with rivalry games such as the Cavs versus the Warriors. Have that up to 3 games a year instead of 2. And then you just have the top 16 teams. 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, 3 versus 14, etc., etc. And you just have the best basketball. And yes, I get it. Ice hockey doesn't do it. The NFL doesn't do it that way, or neither does baseball. You have your leagues, you have your conferences. Whatever. These guys do not have a 20-year sample size of huge competitions imbalance the way that we've had. It needs to be fixed because right now, as I said, it's gotten so bad that nobody's paying attention to the East. If no one's paying attention to the East, they're not going to be paying attention in the NBA Finals. It's time to fix this. It really is. You can't fix it this season, but enough of sitting on your hands and doing research. Just get it done. Fix this bloody thing. It's not difficult to fix it. The only difficulty in fixing it is having to actually do some work and saying, okay, we have to make a change. We tried to wait it out to see if it will rebalance itself. It hasn't worked. We have to go in a new direction. Have a backbone and change it. And that's it for episode 31. This was a bonus episode, so a regular episode will be coming out on Friday.